Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Attract and Stand Out podcast. I'm your host, Darlene Hawley, and we're having a conversation today with Miss Nikki Rausch, who is a sales maven. And y'all know I love me some sales. That's such an important part when it comes to building our personal brands and building businesses. And even as leaders inside of organizations, sales is one of the pieces that a lot of people say they're afraid of. They're the hardest part. It's the part that gives them the most sensation in their body, butterflies in their bellies when they're having those sales conversations. And so I am so excited to talk to you today, Nikki. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I love to talk sales. So I love talking to people who also love to talk sales.
We're going to nerd out, I'm sure.
Okay, good.
It's such an important part. And I feel like as a business coach and a communication trainer for leaders inside of organizations, like it's the one piece that we have to be really good at. We have to be confident when we walk into a sales conversation or we're walking into a room to get up on stage and really speak up for the ideas and issues and matters that mean the most to us. And sometimes we hold back a little bit or we get in our head and we start to tell ourselves stories and all those different pieces. So I'm excited to see what your thoughts are on it and how we can help our audience, to really take it to the next level, because sales is not something to be afraid of. It's fun. Like we have to have them to grow our businesses. We have to
It's
have
true.
them in organizations to get, to the next level and to keep the business going. So when we can talk about it in a fun way, I think it really opens up doors and lets people go, oh, that's not so scary. Let's do this. So
Yes.
before we dive into all the sales conversation though, Nikki, I would love if you could just take us back a little bit. Who are you? What do you do? And how do you really support people in the sales world?
So I am a sales professional by trade. I was in the tech space for over 17 years and had a lot of success there as a professional sales rep and managing a large territory, the traveling salesperson. I always say, like, I traveled so much, my airline used to send me a Christmas gift. So that usually kind of gives people some context of how much I was traveling. I started Sales Maven in 2013. And the reason I started the business really was I was meeting these amazing women entrepreneurs at these networking events, and I realized pretty quickly that they were struggling to make money in their business. And the piece that was kind of that sticking point for them is they didn't really understand how to have effective sales conversations. And that was something that I really do understand and had a lot of success with. And so I just started wanting to just be of service and help them. And I didn't have a business at that point, but I started helping some of them, and they were getting really great results. And one of them finally pulled me aside and was like, "Why aren't you doing this for a business? Like, why aren't you teaching people these skills? You make selling so easy." And my first initial response is that, "Well, that's dumb because I don't think people will pay for that." She's like, "I'm pretty sure people will pay you." And so 2013 started Sales Maven, primarily supporting women business owners and teaching them how to have more effective sales conversations. And it's turned out to be the most rewarding thing I have ever done professionally, to be able to teach people, simple ways that allow for their own personality to show up in a conversation, and that they can, have success at the end where they exchange dollars for services or product. That feels really empowering, and it helps, I think women, when they make money, are making bigger impacts in our communities and in our world. And so, yeah, I just have the best job in the world. And like I said, primarily support women. I work with people in private coaching situations. I do live trainings, and then I have a group coaching program. So that's how I work with clients now.
Awesome. I want to hit on something you said, like that piece of like we don't know what like sometimes we don't see what we're amazing at because we are so good at it. We just assume everybody else understands and is good at it. So I think so many people I talk to, I know, like myself included, and like with you sharing your story, like we forget, like not everybody knows how to, like, no, not everybody knows how to do sales. Like it's not something that, everybody's confident with. And that's one of those pieces, like, especially like if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, what am I good at? Like identifying, like, what are you really good at? And ask people like, hey, like, why do people come to me? What are people, coming to me for, advice or information on? And we don't realize because we think, oh, this is so easy. Sales comes easy or whatever our gift is comes so easy. Like it doesn't come easy to everybody else. So I love that somebody else kind of pointed out, like, you can get paid for this, like, you can make this a career. Because I think we miss it so much. Like, so many people don't realize their superpowers are so special and unique, and how much other people are like, God, I wish I had that, Nikki. Like, please give me some of that sales goodness that you have.
Yeah, I find that actually a lot with my clients, especially when we're working out their offers and pricing and things like that. And oftentimes it's like, I don't think people will pay me for that because it seems really easy. And I'm like, it's only easy to you because you're an expert at it.
Yeah.
Yes, people will pay you for it. Yes, it should be a part of the offer. So I think from my own journey and then now getting really to work with now thousands of women and teaching them how to sell successfully, that's a common theme, I think, across the board. And especially with women, I will say, because I work with men too, but it's women that primarily tend to undervalue the things that come easy to us that actually are the things that your clients will often pay the most for.
Mm. Yeah, so true. And I see it with my clients as well. Like, for whatever women, like the men that I coach are like, let's go, let's do this. Like, I'm really good at this. I got this. And then like the women, like we question ourselves for some reason. And I don't know if that's like part of society or if it's like a little bit of that. Women, I feel like, have more of like the inner critic and the imposter syndrome and the comparisonitis of putting themselves up against everybody else. And so they have
Yeah,
that self-doubt piece that pops in.
for sure. For sure.
So when you think about sales and you think about like the impact that you're making in the world, like what is like the big, like if you were to like think of like one special piece when it comes to sales that really is like the piece that helps people set themselves apart and really close those sales, like what are some of the things that you really hit on and love to talk to your clients about?
Well, there's a couple things. One is, I think there's a misconception about what selling is. I think people think, oh, selling means I need to convince people of something. And I totally disagree with that. I think sales isn't something that you do to another person, it's something you do with another person. And so I teach this very collaborative approach to selling, and I teach a 5 step process framework. That's my signature framework. I call it the selling staircase. That is how to have a successful sales conversation. And the reason I teach it as a staircase is because most people understand that when you're ascending a staircase, you go one step at a time. You don't start at the bottom and just immediately hop up to the top step because, some people with really strong cores might be able to do that, but the rest of us might be like, I don't think I'm just gonna, hop up to the top step because I might bang my shins. It's going to be uncomfortable. Maybe I'll miss a step. It'll feel weird. And that's where selling gets awkward and weird, is because you go right from meeting somebody to immediately pitching them. That can make the sales conversation awkward and weird, not just for you, but frankly for the potential buyer, because they're like, I don't know who you are and why you're showing up and all of a sudden, trying to sell to me. So teaching people this 5 step process for a sales conversation allows for them to be authentic, be genuine, and have a real conversation, and be strategic, not just like, oh, we're just talking, but I don't know if it'll go anywhere. No, you know where it's going to go because you're leading the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you mind sharing like what those 5 steps are?
I'd
Can
be
you tell us
happy
a little bit
to.
about it?
Yeah, yeah. So the 5 steps. The first step is introduction. So, this is the objective here is to make a powerful first impression. Some of that is being done with, on social media, through your website. Somebody's hearing you on a podcast, right? They're forming an impression about you. Your job is to do everything you can to set yourself up for making a powerful, positive first impression. So, once you do that, the next logical step is in the selling staircase is to create curiosity. So we want to pique people's interest. We want people to go like, "Oh, what is that about?" Or "Who is this person?" Or "Oh, maybe I could learn something here." And creating curiosity is the or excuse me, it's the first most missed step in anything I teach. Because oftentimes when I'm talking to business owners and I ask them, do you know how to create curiosity? When you're talking about your product or service, they look at me like, what do you mean curiosity? Like, no, I have no idea about that. And yet, if you cannot create curiosity, oftentimes you don't ever even get past that first part of the conversation because they don't know what you know. They don't know what's possible for them of, what they would get from working with you. So you have to create some curiosity. That's step 2. Step 3 is the discovery portion of the conversation. And the objective there is to find out does this person have a problem or a need or a want? Do I have a solution that meets that problem, need, or want? And do I have permission to put it in front of them? So that's the third step, the discovery. Fourth step is after we've established, yes, they have a need. Yes, I have permission. The fourth step is proposal. That's where you're actually laying out your offer. And frankly, that's really where the selling in the conversation is happening, is in that fourth step, proposal. And then step 5 goes really closely with step 4, which is the close. This is the second most missed step in the sales conversation. Most people get to step 4 and then linger because they're not sure exactly how to close the conversation. But if you're missing the close, what happens is you think people might buy from you, but then they actually don't. Or you think the conversation went well and you're trying to like end it and send them some kind of a proposal. But then again, it just doesn't ever go anywhere. And chances are it's because you're not actually closing in your conversations. And if you're not closing, people aren't making decisions to hire you. So those are the 5 steps: introduction, create curiosity, discovery, proposal, close.
I love it. And that last part of it too, like so often, I see this with clients all the time, but when I think back 18 years ago when I started my business, I would do all the work and never ask them if they would want to work with me.
Yeah.
Like I would have all the conversations, get them curious, like do all
Yep.
the steps that you were sharing. And this is something that I see so often with my clients is they're like, here's all the information, here's how we can, I can support you. They never ask, like, are you ready to get started?
Yeah.
Like to get started, like just that simple question. And people are like, oh, I'll get started. Let's start next Tuesday. But they forget to ask and then they never go back and actually close the sale. What do you say to your clients like when they get stuck in that place of like like, just asking for the sale, or they get somebody who's like, yeah, I'm interested. I want to work, this sounds good, but they don't like finish and like actually get them to sign the dotted line or get them to take those next steps. Like, what are some things that you have your clients do to really push them over if they're like ready, but they're not like signing the paycheck?
Yeah. So the most important thing is your job is to make it as easy as possible for people to sign up to work with you. So when you're in that conversation, your job is to put the question in front of them, the closed question. And I always teach it as it's an invitation. The reason I teach it as invitation is because it's a little softer for especially people who are uncomfortable selling. It's like, oh, it feels so like scary to have to close a sale. But if you think I'm just issuing the invitation and they get to make the decision as to whether or not they want to move forward, like it's their decision. I respect that I'm talking to an adult. They can make their own decision. But what we often forget is like we think, oh, well, they'll just let me know if they want to hire me, or they'll just let me know when they're ready to sign up. But actually, they won't let you know. And the reason they won't let you know, it's not because they don't want to hire you or because they don't want to sign up. It's because our brains are tired and our brains are overtaxed. We have decision fatigue. And so we will tend to postpone making a decision on something if it doesn't require immediate action because we're tired and we're overwhelmed with the amount of decisions we have to make. I don't know if you've heard this stat before, Darlene, but they say that the average adult makes a certain number of decisions every day. Have you heard this before?
But I think so. I'm not.
Okay. Just if you'll play with me for just a second,
Yeah.
if you think about, because I know you mentioned before we hit record, like you've got 2 kids at home today. And so I know you're a mom, right? Like you've got a lot of decisions that you make throughout at the day. When you think of the number of decisions on average you make, what would be a number? Just guess off the top of your head.
In a day,
Yeah, in
too
a
many.
day.
I mean, I want to say probably like 80 to 100, but I feel like it's probably like 1,000.
Yeah, so that's a great answer, and that's a common answer. And the answer from the statistic is that the average adult makes between 30 and 60,000 decisions every day.
Yeah.
Every day. That's an incredible amount of decisions. And I personally think people who are moms make more. I'm not a mom, so I really honor the fact like you're making so many decisions every single day, so your brain is tired. Like you have decision fatigue. All of us are struck with it. So when you're in a conversation, in a sales conversation, if you don't put a closed question in front of somebody, you're essentially saying to them, hey, just put me on your decision list of 60,000 decisions you're going to make today. Put me at the bottom because that's how it works. You always put things at the bottom of your to-do list. And then hopefully I'll work my way up on your to-do list. But they say most of us die with our to-do list undone. So the chance of you ever getting to the top of somebody's to-do list, it's pretty slim pickings. So your job in a conversation with someone, again, is to make it as easy as possible for them to make a decision to hire you. The way you do that is by you ask the question, would you like to get signed up for this? Should we go ahead and get your first appointment scheduled? Should we go ahead and, secure your spot in the program, or whatever you want to say here? But the answer to a closed question is typically yes or no. And it's the type of question that causes people to take action. Because if their answer is yes, then you can say, then the next step is I can go ahead and take your payment now. Right. And then now they're in because they've got skin in the game. They just paid for it, or they paid a portion of it, or whatever it is. So you have to close. And if you have people that are sitting out there that you think are ghosting you, or you have this list of people who are potential buyers at some point down the road, but they haven't bought yet, chances are you're not closing. You might think you are, but you're actually not. So
Yeah.
we got to just change that in your system, change that in your process. You got to close.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned like that yes, no question towards the end, because a lot of what I work with my clients on is like in the beginning, like when you're in that curious stage, as you call it, I think it was like level 2, like you're
Yeah.
asking lots of questions, you're curious, you don't want to ask a yes or no question there. You want to get like, you want them to like share lots of information with you and give you a lot of information so that you can also decide, I think, as the person who has a service to offer, like you're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you on this call. Like, are they going to be a good fit for the program? Are they going to be a good fit, to work one-on-one with me, whether it's one-on-one business or if you have group coaching or if you're selling a product, even like, is this the right product for the person that I'm having this conversation with? But it's like, it's curious and it's, continuing the conversation and getting all the information out. And then I love like that you frame like the yes, no question towards the end. Like, are you in? Like, are you ready to get started? Here's how we can do it. Yes.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it goes to no, right? Like sometimes we haven't given them enough information. And that's when we get the objectives, which is, I think, what scares people the most in the sales conversation. They're going to tell me they need to talk to their partner, or they don't have enough money, or this is, it's a bigger investment than they thought it was going to be, or whatever. Like they have all the million objectives that people can come up with at those points. What are your thoughts when it comes to the objectives during the sales conversation? Like, what are some tips if somebody does get the like, oh, I just don't have enough money, I can't afford it. Like, how do we get through that? And do we get through it?
Yeah. Okay. So I always say when you issue closed language, one of five things are going to happen. They're going to say yes. Great. You got a new client. You tell them what the next step is. The second thing is they're going to ask a question. Great. Chances are they need that question answered in order to hire you. So you answer the question and then you issue that invitation to sign up to work with you. The third thing that's going to happen is they have an objection, which that happens, right? Like people have objections sometimes. And so the objection is to understand, first and foremost, is have they actually stated what their real objection is? Because sometimes people will give you an objection, but that's not a true objection. It's just like, that's what I think I'm supposed to say here, right? So we got to check to see, is this a real objection and can it be overcome? The way that you do that is you issue what's called a conditional close question. So a conditional close question is saying to somebody, if I were able to overcome this objection, whatever the objection is, if I was able to show you a way that we could make this fit into your budget, would you then be interested in moving forward? So notice I'm just asking a question. It's like an if then question. So if I was able to do this, would you then be ready to move forward? And the fact of the matter is if the answer is, even if you offered me a payment plan, I still couldn't do this because it is not in my budget, right? Then that's the person saying to you, they're not the right fit. Because sometimes, like, not everybody's a client and not everybody is the right fit at the right time. So sometimes you bless and release people, and that's okay. And you should be blessing, releasing people. So if the true objection cannot be overcome, if there's no solution here, right? Like somebody would say, well, I'd be willing to pay you $1 for your $10,000 program. you would probably feel totally comfortable saying, okay, go kick rocks, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a $10,000 program. I'm not giving it to you for $1. And you wouldn't have a hard time with that. But sometimes what happens is people get into this, like, I'm only willing to pay $1,000 for your $10,000 program. And now you're like, nobody will pay for my $10,000 program. It's like, maybe you're just not talking to the right people. And this one person who's pushing back on price just needs to be blessed and released so that you're not taking up time and space and mental energy telling yourself that people won't pay you. You just got to talk to better fit people, right? There's that. So it's okay to have somebody issue an objection. And oftentimes you just need to be able to overcome the objection. And it could be something like, I don't think I have time for this. Well, if we were able to, start it a month out, or if we were able to get some time scheduled on your calendars now, 1, 2, 3 months out, then that way we could get started and you'd already have that time blocked. Would that be a solution for you? And if they're like, oh, yeah, that's totally, that would totally work. Okay. And if the answer is no, again, you can't overcome that objection. Don't beat yourself up about it. Just bless and release. Move on to the next potential buyer. And sometimes people will say no, and there's nothing you can do about that. Although, when somebody says no to me, if I issue a closed question and they go, nope, not for me, if we've gotten that far through the sales process and they're giving me a no, chances are I'm kind of surprised. Like it might be shocking they're saying no because it's like, gosh, it seemed like they were so on board with this. They're a good fit for it based on everything they've shared. So I might ask in that case, if somebody said no, I might say, would you be willing to share your reason for declining? Because I've got to learn something here because I've missed a step with them somewhere. There's some kind of information that didn't come out. So I need to understand. And if they're willing to share it with me, doesn't mean I'm going to earn their business because the answer might just be no. And again, bless and release. It's not a huge deal. And then the last thing that often comes up when you close is people will say, and actually, I think, Darlene, you mentioned this one, is they'll say, I need to talk to my partner, or I need to, take some time to think about it. And a lot of times people assume that that's like the kiss off, right? That's them saying, like, I'm not going to buy from you. I never assume that. When somebody says they need to think about it, I will say something along the lines of, is there any additional information I can provide to you now that would make that decision easier for you, right? Like, I'm going to check. And if they're like, no, I just need a few days to think about it, I would say, great. Let's go ahead and schedule a circle back call on our calendars now. That way I can answer any questions that come up in that time between, and we can talk about next steps for working together. And then I actually get a time scheduled on their calendar and mine because I don't want to spend a bunch of time in between going like,
Connecting.
should I email Darlene? Should I wait? Should I send her a text message? Should I pick up the phone and call her? Like, I don't want to spend a bunch of mental energy on that. I just want to know, like, hey, her and I are talking on Friday at 10. And
Yeah.
then that way we can answer questions. We can talk about next steps, whatever that is. So that was a long answer to your question.
Oh, I love it. And it's such good information because I think we forget like how to like we don't have to end the call. Like I'm somebody I don't say yes in the moment very often. Like every once in a while, I'll already have like done the research and I know I'm ready to purchase. I'm just having, the conversation just to get a couple questions answered. But I've learned over the time that I'm somebody who needs to sleep on it. If I make a quick decision, I might have regret and I would hate to call you back and be like, you know what, I actually thought about it overnight. The answer, like I've changed my mind. Like I don't want to do that. Like I want to make sure when
No,
I
of
say
course.
yes that I'm in for it. And so I call it like putting it on my shelf. Like I want to take whatever we talked about, I want to put it on my shelf. I'm going to like digest it while I'm sleeping, think about it, give myself some time to process it. And usually the next day or maybe 2 days later, I'm like a full body yes, like, yeah, this is the right choice. I'm ready to move forward and I can move forward when, when we have that follow-up call in 2 days versus me saying yes and then living with that regret. Cause I've had so many times in my life where I've just, I said yes quickly because I'm a helper. I loved it, like, whatever. Even if it's something like, hey, the school needs, support with this or something. And I'm like, yes, I'm in. And then the next day I'm like, oh, but that doesn't actually line up with my values or my goals and what I'm trying to work on right now. Like it's not servicing me. And so then I've had to go back and either do it begrudgingly or
Right.
go back and say, I'm so sorry. Like I overcommitted myself. Like this isn't a good fit. Like it's time wise or whatever it is. And so I've learned like if I sleep on it, I can come back with a full body yes and move forward. And I like to do that with my clients. Like not everybody is built like me. Like I know not everybody needs to sleep on it, but I know on my sales calls, like we schedule that follow-up call like you shared. I'm like think about it. Go talk to your partner, sleep on it tonight. Do like sometimes people are like, I've got a couple of conversations with other people that are, in the same industry. And I'm like,
Mhm.
do the research, do the work, but let's swing back and like identify like how do we want to move forward from here? And it's not always, sometimes they actually, I'd love your advice on this one because I just was talking with a client about this a couple of days ago, and she was doing very much like what you teach a little bit, pretty similar to like how I work with my clients too. And she had the follow-up conversation scheduled, and they canceled. And so she was like, they canceled our follow-up call. Like, what do I do? I'm curious. Just, I love to hear other people's perspectives on that. Like, what's your follow-up system when somebody is like, they're pretty much a yes, we've got that next call. And now I feel like I'm in limbo. I want to hear what you have to say, and then I'll tell you what I said.
Yeah, so I'm going to check to see if they've made a decision, right, to go in a different direction. So I'm going to ask that as a pretty direct question. So I'm going to say, I noticed that, we were supposed to talk on Friday and it looks like you canceled the session. I just wanted to circle back with you and ask, was there any particular reason that you canceled? Would you like to reschedule? And if you've made a decision to go in a different direction, would you be willing to share that with me? Like, I'm going to ask pretty direct questions here, because if they canceled because something came up, right? Family obligation, whatever, and they just didn't have time to reschedule it, I'm not going to make a big deal about it. And if they do want to reschedule it, my job is to make it as easy as possible for them. But if they've decided to go in a different direction, I'm going to ask a question in a way that is soft enough for hopefully for them to be willing to give me a real answer. And not that it needs to be uncomfortable or aggressive, right? Because this can happen sometimes when you say no to a salesperson, they get a little bit defensive or they get aggressive or they go into like, oh, I'm going to change your mind. I'm going to convince you that you're wrong. And I mean, I don't know about you, Darlene, but I hate that crap. Like, I don't want anybody trying to tell me that I'm wrong or that the decision I've made is wrong. And it doesn't change my mind. It just annoys me. Right. So then not only do they not get my business this time, but they never get my
Never get
business
it.
in the future.
Absolutely.
So I think asking a pretty direct question, like if you've decided to go in another direction, would you be willing to share that as well? Like that it's soft enough for it's like, I'm not going to be aggressive about it. I'm just trying to like ascertain what's going on here so that we can, part ways or continue down this path together. And either way is okay. I think it's important to always send the message like, we're okay either way. Like, doesn't mean that we can never speak again if you decide to go buy from someone else.
And I can't tell you how many times that I'm sure, Nikki, this has happened to you too, where, we've blessed and released the relationship at that moment, and then they refer somebody business, or
Right.
they show back up at, an event that I'm hosting, or they send me a message and they're like, hey, I have a question about this, or hey, I'm ready to work with you. And I'm like, if we were to be that, I don't know. I feel bad. Like the poor cars, like the used car salesman get the bad rap. But like I feel like it's that like where like you come in to buy something and like you sell them something totally different, or
Yeah.
like you push them away so far that they're like, I'm never coming back to this dealership again because you made me feel like I didn't buy this Corvette when I came in to buy a minivan. Like
Exactly.
like because I didn't buy this thing, like now, like, you've washed your hands with me. Like I want people to feel like, maybe it's not now. Now's not the right time. That's totally okay. I want to still provide value to you. I want to still let you know that I'm here. I'm still going to create tons of free content so that, you can get the support that you need. And maybe you're somebody who wants to DIY it, and you're going to pull my little pieces and you can build your puzzle, like you can build it the way you need to. But when you're ready for like that quick action and like you need the support now and you're ready to like make those big leaps and bounds now, like, I'm here for you.
Yeah. Just
Want
keep
that
that
kind of
door open. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I just had this actually. Somebody had reached out to me through LinkedIn, had this very complimentary, message to me, heard me on a podcast and started listening to my podcast. And so I issued an invitation, invited her to like take a next step. She had a question about my group coaching program. I answered it and then I followed up with an invitation. And she said to me at the time, she's like, I've just started listening to your podcast. I really want to get through all the episodes. And I'm thinking to myself, like, wow, I have 220 some episodes. Like that's a lot of episodes to get through. So I may not be hearing from her for a while. And I was like, hey, just know that you're welcome to reach out to me at any point when you are ready. We'd love to have you in the group. Like soft invitation. And about a week and a half later, she signed up for the group. Now she's in the group. She's happy and she's loving it. And it wasn't like I don't need to pressure anybody into buying from me. Like I'm willing to just say, I'm here when you're ready. Know that I'll be so delighted to get to work with you. Sometimes that's enough to leave that door open because it is awkward to go back to somebody who was disappointed or who was a little bit out of shape if you say no to them. Like, why would you even go back to them? Because there's a thousand, other ways to get solutions to whatever your problem is, right? Like there's a thousand other like sales coaches you could go hire. There's tons of business coaches you could go hire. There's tons of people who can help you with your website or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. I just want to be the person that like, oh, Nikki was so kind when I said no to her that I feel comfortable now going back and saying like, oh, now I'm ready. And I think she'll be excited about it, right? Like that feels nice when someone's excited to get to work with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a different type of vibe we're putting out into the world
Yeah.
because we've all dealt with the salespeople who, I mean, I get probably 10 to 20 a day between emails and social media where they don't even know me. They've never met me in their life. And the first conversation they're having with me, well, it's not like a conversation, but the first message they're sending to me is like to buy their thing.
Yeah.
Like, who's teaching these things that people feel like, oh, I can just like cold message the heck out of like a million people and one or two will say yes. So I guess they're just taking the odds game. But like I'm more in the realm of like my sales conversation's a relationship. Like we're just building a relationship and when you're ready, you're gonna know I'm here. I've had plenty of people come back. One of my clients that I worked with a couple years ago, I'd seen their name, but I'd never had talked to them or anything. And after he decided to hire me and we did our sales call, he said yes. We started working together. I was like, how did you hear about me? He's like, I've been following you for 6 years. I'm like, that's a long time to be following somebody and for that person to not even know that they're there, right?
Yeah.
Like there's, and so we're putting out content, we're building relationships, they're seeing how we're engaging with other people, they see how we respond to things. Like people are watching those different things and they're all like little breadcrumbs is like how I like to visualize it leading when that's the right time, they're going to get led to the right place.
Yeah, this comes from my background in neurolinguistic programming, but we all have what's called a convincer strategy. So I want to differentiate here. I'm not talking about your job is not to convince somebody, but every single one of us has a convincer strategy. And a convincer strategy is a certain number of times we'll say no to something before we say yes. And it's context specific, sometimes it's people specific. Like you have one in certain areas of your life. You might be like somebody who you even said already, like you like to take a little bit of time. You need time to think about it so you don't have buyer's remorse. Like there's something about your convincer strategy, right? Like other people might hear about something one time and be like, okay, I'm in. But we don't know what people's convincer strategies are. And frankly, they don't even know how to tell you what it is because they probably don't even know what the number is. So, like this guy who followed you for 6 years, that was his convincer strategy. Something happened, something changed, something like you hit his number where he was like, okay, I'm in. And I ask clients all the time, like, how do we get connected? And a lot of times they'll say, oh, I heard you on a podcast. I started listening to your podcast. And then I'll say, how many times did you listen to my podcast before you took me up on that next step offer? And people say sometimes it's like 20, sometimes it's 200, sometimes it's two. But I don't know what that number is. So my job is to just continue to be available, put things out into the market, and make it so easy for people when they are ready to take that next step. And I think that's what I teach my clients too, is your job is to just make it as easy as possible for people when you've hit that number and they're like, okay, Darlene, I'm ready. Let's go.
Let's do it. Yeah, it's so true because and everybody's so different. Like that's the one
Mhm.
piece we forget too. Like you might get one client this way and
Yeah.
it took one, two, three, and they were in. And the next client it might take, 30 touch points and 30 conversations or 30 ways of them consuming something that you created. And we just don't know. So how do we keep showing up? And that's why I think like as we're building personal brands and businesses and putting ourselves out there, like don't stop just because no one's responding today doesn't mean that there's not somebody who's got, their side eye on you. They're like, I'm
Mhm.
watching you. I see you. but they're just, it's not the right time, the right space, the right moment. And they might not be in the right, position in that moment, but when they're ready, like if you stop showing up and stop, putting your content out there and, being available, somebody else is going to show up and they're going
That's
to
right.
all start seeing that person. And then, and like, that would be so sad, right? If it's like the day after you gave up and somebody else put their thing out and like, you're no longer there they're not seeing your content, they're not seeing you show up anymore. And now they move on to somebody else. And so it's why it's so important, I feel like, to have, a strategy in place to continue to be visible, to continue to market yourself, have the sales conversations, put yourself in positions where you're, you know, getting seen and being heard so that they can find you when they're ready.
And make sure I would add to that because, yes, I agree 100% to everything you said. And make sure that you are being really forthcoming in ways to work with you because people sometimes, like, you can put a bunch of content out there, but if people don't understand how to take that next step with you, they're not going to jump through a bunch of hoops to try to figure it out. Your job is to, again, make it so easy that, like, here's a next step. Doesn't mean that they're going to take it that time. And sometimes, this is why I test all kinds of things in my business all the time. Sometimes I'm putting out high end offers, sometimes I'm putting in low end offers, and kind of everything in between, but I don't know when somebody's going to go, "Oh, I'm in. This is the offer I've been waiting for." But yet people say all the time when they buy stuff from me, like, "Nikki, I was just waiting for you to put this offer out. I was just waiting for this opportunity to work one-on-one with you. Or I was just waiting for this, this invitation to join your group program." But I'm putting out those offers continuously all the time because I don't know when somebody's going to get it and be like, "Oh, I was waiting for it this week."
Yeah. Yeah. And we have to tell people that we have something to offer too. Like
Yep,
I've had clients where like they're like, I'm sharing on social media and like writing, newsletters and I have blog posts. And then like we start working together and we really like digging in with them. I'm like, they have no call to actions. Like nobody
that's
knows,
right.
like nobody's like they're not inviting them to that next step. I'm like, so that
Yep.
call to action piece is so important. Like you said, like invite them in, tell them how to get on a call with you, tell them how to buy your course, how to buy your, to work with you. Like we forget, like we have to be like, oh, and by the way, I can help.
Yeah. And would you like this next step? Are you ready for blah, blah, blah? Here's how to get. Yeah, for sure. Got to tell them.
So good. I feel like I have so many more questions, but I'm going to start to wrap us up. Before we move into rapid fire questions, Nikki, is there like if you were to give like one little last nugget to people who might be going, I need to get better at sales, like what would you tell people to do?
I would say the most important thing is that when somebody has given you what I call buying signal, so buying signal is a verbal or nonverbal cue that gives that they've indicated some interest, that you always follow up with an invitation. Because even if it turns out that they're not ready yet, that's okay. I've never had anybody like clutch their pearls and be like, "How dare you sell to me?" or "How dare you issue an invitation to me?" So if you get any kind of interest from somebody, be willing to issue an invitation. It can be soft, it can be direct, it can be anything in between. Issue that invitation because oftentimes that's what people need to take that next step with you.
So good. I love it. All right. So I have a couple fun questions for you. If I could buy
Okay.
you a plane ticket and send you anywhere in the world today, where would you go and why?
Oh boy. I really, really want to go to Iceland. Years ago, I got asked to sit on a panel with these incredible business women from Iceland, and we were talking about what does it mean to be a woman in business. And I was just so impressed with them that it's always made me want to go and like check out their country.
That's awesome. A friend of mine just got back from there and I was seeing some pictures and I was like, I never knew I wanted to go there. And I was like, I kind of want to go there, even though I'm not a cold person. Like I'm
I'm
definitely
not really either.
more like sunshine and tropical. But and then when you think about self-care and like just refilling like your cup, what are some things that you like to do for yourself to like just recharge?
Well, where I live, we have a river that runs through the town that I live. I'm in Boise, Idaho. We have the Boise River. And along the Boise River, we have the Green Belt, which is like 27 miles of walking and bike riding path. So I go for walks along the river, and that fills my soul and gives me that like, and I don't listen to podcast. I listen to a lot of podcasts, but when I walk on the river, I don't have anything in my ears. I'm really present. I'm praying. I'm, preferred is I'm walking with my husband, we're having some conversation, and it's just my time to like really be in a place that brings me an incredible amount of joy.
Sounds so good. I was just talking to somebody recently about like I, I walk with podcasts on usually a lot,
Mhm.
but I've been noticing I've needed more like quiet space for myself. And I shifted to like now when I go for my walk, I'm like, okay, leave my earbuds at home, like just go for the walk. Like you don't need to have something constantly going in your ear. And I would say the past like couple of weeks, like I've noticed such a shift in like how I'm showing up in like my creative space, and I just feel more connected to myself versus when
Yeah.
I'm constantly consuming so much content. Like I don't get that gut reaction from myself of what I like. Because we all have the answers within, right? So
Yeah, for sure.
like we don't need another podcast, even though you need to listen to our podcast, obviously, but you don't always need another podcast in our ear. So
Yeah.
I love that advice, like just like being one with nature and having like real, authentic, vulnerable conversations with somebody else too. So
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah.
And my last question for you is, what does attract and stand out mean to you?
Attract and stand out means to really stand in your place of credibility and authority and speak from that place of what really matters to you and be willing to be vulnerable and put your thought leadership out into the world. And then be okay with, uh, repelling people away with it, because I think you have to repel people to stand out and attract. I think you have to repel the people who aren't a good fit so that you make space for the people who are the right fit for whatever it is that you're doing in the world.
Absolutely. Love that. Nikki, people are going to want to connect with you. They want to hang out and find you and absorb all your sales goddessness. Tell people where they can connect with you.
Probably the best way is to check out the podcast, which is Sales Maven. So, obviously, podcast listeners here, check out my podcast, Sales Maven. My website is yoursalesmaven.com. And yeah, love to connect with your listeners.
And I know you have an amazing free gift. Can you tell us about it?
I do. I have an ebook for your listeners. It's called Closing the Sale, and it's really about boosting your confidence in those closing conversations. So I know I broke down the selling staircase for you. It kind of focuses on those last three steps, which is often where people can get stuck. So you can get that by going to yoursalesmaven.com/standout. So this is specific for your audience. And I would love to gift that to you. It's a fast, easy read with some great language suggestions in there that will really set you up for success in those sales calls.
Awesome. I'm going to go grab it. Everybody listening, we all could use some extra support when it comes to sales. I know it's the one place that I talk so much to my clients on, and even just my community. And so go grab Nikki's resource. Nikki, it's been such an honor to have you on the show. Thank you so much for being here. And that's a wrap, everyone, for another episode of the Attract and Stand Out podcast. Remember, I believe in you. You're allowed to stand out. You're allowed to shine. You're allowed to be you. We'll see you next time.